everyone. Welcome to the third episode of Retales, where we talk to the veterans from the consumer goods and retail industry to gain deep insights and learn from their journeys and hear their stories. Today, for the third episode, we've got who I call Javed Bhai, Mr. Javed Akhtar. He is the Vice President of Digital Transformation and Growth for Unilever across South Asia. It's an honor to have you today on this podcast episode. As for me, I'm Zarif Hussain. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Retail Pulse.
Thank you so much, Zarif. It's wonderful to be part of this initiative. Look forward to catching up with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wanted to right off the bat kind of talk to you about or ask you about your journey, which has been incredible. Uh, you know, uh, you started off your journey before your career in the top business institute in Bangladesh, and you moved into some of the leading companies in the FMCG space, starting with BAT and then Unilever. How has that journey been for you?
Uh, it's to be honest, it's been a wonderful journey, and it's been a really wonderful because when I was doing business degree and getting degree, there was no surety exactly what one would get into, and so obviously when we came into BAT, it was the first one actually to offer us jobs. So, and to be honest, I was elated that somebody was actually offering me a job, and that was a good 23, 24 years back.
Yeah.
And I think once I started from there, and it was a wonderful experience being part of Bishop and Tobacco and doing that role over the years and really being able to really learn and really learn ground up. I think it was a wonderful experience. And after that, I joined Unilever, and Unilever brought in perspective of working across multiple brands, because obviously it's got a plethora of brands that you work in. It also helps you to go across multiple categories. And I was also blessed to work across multiple geographies across Asia. So it's been a phenomenal learning experience. I mean, even till date, I keep on learning every day.
That's amazing. In fact, I saw recently I saw a LinkedIn post of yours where you said that you just completed 20 years at Unilever, and you had a post about some of the learnings that you had about leadership and your career, and that was really amazing to see. And it was incredible to see so many of the leaders who we admire from the Unilever system. Even being outside of Unilever, commenting, mentioning you, it was incredible to see. So, congratulations to you on that.
No, thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Yeah, as I said, I feel like a dinosaur now being in the system. It's a long time, but
Yeah.
I have enjoyed every moment of it.
No, that's incredible. I mean, that's very rare, especially these days, to be a part of a system for so long. But obviously, you've had a stellar career and continue to do so. And Unilever is an amazing company. But something that you mentioned that you started off your career in BAT, British American Tobacco, from the ground up, and that's interesting that you say ground up because we all know that especially there's the book CEO Factory which is about HUL Hindustan Unilever, and there's one very interesting concept where the author talks about being able to be in the dusty rural villages but also being able to be in Europe talking to investment bankers and whatnot and business partners, but you need that experience from the ground up to have the knowledge and the know-how of both sides. And when you say you started ground up from BAT, that's super interesting. And I'd love to, hear about your journey or any stories that you may have right from that beginning.
Yeah. So, as I was mentioning, we were actually quite glad BT offered her a job. And that job was from outside, it looked extremely fancy.
Yeah,
Fancy because you were given a car, and I joined as a data officer, which is
yeah,
the entry level in what they call trade marketing and
yeah,
distribution department, TM&D. So it was a fancy job. I mean, fresh out of university, getting a car, you drive around, everything gets taken care of. But my job description was fundamentally three things. My
yeah,
job description was making sure that I am able to sell out product from the store. So selling out, so that demand generation was my responsibility. My job was making sure merchandising happening well, and my responsibility was sell in. So which means the salesman that used to work with me was part of the distributors team, is trained and developed so that they can sell into the outlets. So so while fancy words of sell out, sell in, and merchandising, let me in reality tell you what it means. It literally means that every day I have to make calls, which means I have to go to store, and I have to either, if I'm seeing that the outlet is running low on stock, sell those stocks.
Yeah.
If the outlet is dirty, I need to literally clean those shops, and I've personally cleaned many of those shops to really
Yeah.
run. So it literally and honestly, that actually makes you very humbling because you come with this fancy degree and you believe that you've sort of arrived in the world,
Yeah.
and in reality you're at the bottom of the food chain. And what it does, it actually teaches you how this whole process works. For example, the third one I was talking about selling in was also part of it was to how do you really motivate salesmen and make sure they're actually selling in properly. Now you must understand a fresh graduate is coming to a distributor system where salesmen have 30, 40 years of experience. These
Yeah.
are veteran salesmen, and how do you really get the respect to make sure that you're really able to. So from the very beginning, not only are you literally doing some micro job as well that the role actually expects you to do, but you also have to learn the leadership or build the leadership trait. And you don't come with those traits. I mean, you read about them in business schools on books and all those things, but you have to exercise and practice making sure you're able to really inspire the team and work with you. So it's
Yeah.
been an amazing journey to have been doing, and I think BAT actually taught you about really getting into some of these rigors, which really enabled us to grow as data officer. And until this date, I value that experience because I
Yeah.
know how the whole sales infrastructure and everything works. I mean, it's been an amazing learning personally for me.
Yeah, that's really incredible because once you're able to relate to absolutely the last person who is visiting the stores, making the sales, and ensuring the products get delivered, and you see where the rubber hits the road, you actually have a feel, at the tip of your fingertips. Even when you're in the position that you're in today, you have the feel for reality and how things happen on ground because that's ultimately uh, where the action is. So that's incredible to hear, and I'm curious to actually ask you. This sales is not easy, and I myself, having been in the consumer goods industry space, I know how crazy it can get. In the market on ground with the retailers. What's the craziest thing you've done to ensure that you hit your target or that the sale is done?
Craziest thing I would have done to hit my target? Good question. Um, craziest would have done was because a lot of time your so in fact the craziest would have been this is during 98 Bangladesh actually had a 98 99 I think Bangladesh had a huge flood
Yeah.
where the country was underwater, and literally I was loading cigarettes onto a trawler myself all
Wow.
night and making sure that you're able to really supply those stocks. So I
Wow.
don't think I would have ever had an experience of loading tobacco or cigarettes onto a trawler, making sure that the supply line doesn't get disrupted. I
Wow.
think that would be
Wow.
the weirdest experience. Suddenly it came to me. Yes. Uh,
That's
yeah.
that's incredible. Yeah. I mean those are life stories. Those are career stories that you'll never end up forgetting. Something that I thought of was if we talk about Unilever, for example, Unilever is that company where there's so many brands, so many different products, and a lot of people. I mean, everybody has Unilever products in their household, but we don't know that it's made by Unilever. A lot of people, because each brand is strong on its own right, not necessarily because it's a part of Unilever. I would love to hear a story, maybe a consumer insight or something that you saw with these brands and the way that consumers were using or interacting with them that influenced a decision that you took in terms of a product, a brand that we kind of take for granted today.
Okay. There are lots of them. In fact, I was just out of a session explaining how what we see a beer soap and how it sort of connects to people's lives. So, but let me use a different example for you. So, we take a toothpaste for the sake of it being a toothpaste, huh?
Yeah.
Because it's just something that we use in the morning. One of the promises a Pepsodent gives you is 12 hours protection. Now, the whole insight actually, it's a very interesting insight, and how it is connected to the product development is the fact that, listen, and I'm sure your mom would have the same thing. Whenever you're stepping out of house or doing anything, your mom is actually worried about you. There are many things to worry about. Worrying
Yeah.
about he's going to go out, there are traffic, there are people, there are so many things. Will he be safe, right? So moms are always worrying about this thing. The same way moms actually worry when you're going to school is what he's going to eat. So instead of they're always worried, okay, he's going to eat all this junk food, isn't it? And moms are always at a concern. And how do I really protect? Because equally, or the kid's going to have some sweet food. So that's where the whole uncertainty comes. Huh? That whole uncertainty of mothers' uncertainty for their kids. Huh? But if you go and say Pepsodent as a brand takes care of you, hmm, and gives you protection, oral hygiene protection for the next 12 hours, then the mother gets reassured. Actually, that's the genesis of this 12-hour protection, where we actually were speaking to mothers, and mothers were saying that they were really worried when kids go to school because on morning they brush well, but I don't know what they are doing the whole day. So that uncertainty, in order to address that uncertainty, we actually had to make a product that actually could make a claim and actually deliver on a 12-hour protection on that. So products, very simple insight of mother's uncertainty and how do you really link it back in designing a product to deliver to that functionality. So that was one classic example of how you really leverage. And there are many examples, whether it is about Lux and how its fragrance helps you while you're bathing. 50% of Lux is enrolled in Bangladesh. And
Yeah.
how do you really leverage and use that fragrance for giving a great bathing experience? Or whether it is Lifebuoy that helps you to save a life because it
Yeah.
actually helps you to wash your hands and disinfect your hands.
So something interesting I heard about Lifebuoy. Well, actually not heard, but I mean read it in the book CEO Factory. Something very interesting about Lifebuoy is there was a time in the Indian market where more households had Lifebuoy than they had televisions. Now, obviously,
Yes.
that's a good problem to have, right? It's a good problem to have. You have your placement in all these different households, but if somebody doesn't have a television, how do you even market it, right? Because I'm ultimately like ATL marketing, advertising. So, I mean, Unilever is a marketing company. Everybody knows that the marketing is one of the core strengths of Unilever. But how do you market to a world who has your product but doesn't have a TV? And how does that work out?
Well, interesting question, but you'll be surprised. You're right, there may not be as many television. And let me give you an example of how we actually marketed in Bihar, in India, where actually there were television was not accessible and people were not watching television, largely because people couldn't afford a television.
Yeah.
But interestingly, what we found is that there were more mobile phones in people's hand than there were television at houses.
Okay.
Then mobile phone it automatically became a media device. So what we created is actually it's a Khan winning solution and innovation. It's called Khan Khejurat Tesan, where it is all about we used to be miss call and then you get to listen to 15 minutes of program on your mobile phone. So you miss call a number, you get a 15 minutes program, and obviously it gives you an opportunity to talk about your brands. So technically speaking, there will always be an innovative solution, and hence you create something which is a phone, which was originally a communication device. Suddenly you convert that into a media device.
That's such an interesting story. And this is before I'm guessing this is we're talking about well before smartphones even existed, right? So that's why you had to go
Oh
through
no, no,
missed
no.
calls.
Yes, yes, yes. Because those phones that were in those houses were all feature phones. These were not smartphones. That's why we use missed call. See, and they didn't need to call. They just need to give a missed call, and everybody knew a missed call because you get a call back. But this time a callback was a IVR, where it
Yeah,
was a program for 15 minutes that you could do.
that's incredible. Yeah, I mean everybody's got Lifebuoy in their homes. I mean that's kind of a given fact. And when you were talking about toothpaste as well, I know that when you moved from the sales role into a marketing role, uh, that you were working with the Closeup brand. Could you share any interesting stories about Closeup and what happened with building that brand? Because At the time, you were in Bangladesh, and Closeup is the leading toothpaste brand in Bangladesh. So how was that journey? How was that experience?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So that was probably one of the turning points in terms of looking at how do you develop market. And we were trying to figure out that Bangladesh actually those days, and this is early 2000,
Yeah.
roughly around 15-16% of Bangladeshis used to brush. It might sound very weird, but that was the reality. So it's whenever I've given this data, people never believed me. But that used to be the state of our oral hygiene those days.
Yeah.
But essentially, what we try to do is how do you really encourage Bangladeshis to start brushing regularly? And what we started to do is try to understand consumers. And what we realized, the single biggest problem in terms of oral hygiene was bad breath. And the reason for
Okay.
bad breath is also our food habit or consumption habit because we're a country that loves palm, betel nut. We're
Yeah.
a country with a lot of people smokes as well. As a combination of those actually results into really, really bad breath for people. So we suddenly realized that giving a fresh breath was actually a very big driver for people to adopt the category. The second thing was that we needed to make sure that how do you make it accessible? Now, what we used to have is a sachet at 5 taka. Now, it is very difficult to get an opaque toothpaste to get into a sachet because the base is calcium carbonate, and that literally becomes hard because it's very, because the water evaporates through that. Whereas the gel is a water-based product, so it was easier to give it. So what we started to do is really, really ramp up and say, okay, we will do market development through Closeup. Earlier, the whole thinking was that you do it through Pepsodent. And we
Okay.
turned the whole thing upside down and said market development will be done by Closeup, where we're going to address the single biggest challenge in this category. And then we'll make sure it's accessible because 5 taka is a very accessible price point for everyone.
Yeah.
And that dramatically changed, by the way. The oral hygiene started to change dramatically in the country where people started to adopt. I've done lots of fun stuffs with the brand where I took the brand to rural because the Cloneup is a very fun brand. So it's not a very serious brand. It's not a authority brand. It's a fun brand itself. So I used to do this something called Rural Carnival. So
Okay.
technically, the whole idea was how do you really activate was those. I'm sure it's still there. There used to be something that is Mela in the villages.
Yeah.
So it was similar to that. It was a close-up carnival, and the entry to that carnival was people needed to brush their teeth. So there was
What?
actually
Really?
set it up, yeah, because and these are people who never brushed up, but make it fun. And it's a carnival. You go in, you play, you do stuffs, and you win stuffs and got out. But that was just an excuse. So everybody used to, by the way, enter
Yeah.
and used to get a free brush. Obviously, you can't share brushes, so we
Yeah.
used to give them brush, and there was toothpaste, and people used to brush. And that's how we've done. So how do you really make? Because one of the fundamental thing of habit change is you need to really make it fun and interesting for people.
Yeah.
So that's what we've done. So I had a fun time being driving that brand. It was a wonderful experience.
So to enter one of your carnivals, you had to brush your teeth, and obviously you were brushing
Absolutely,
your teeth close up. That's
of
that's
course.
incredible. Of course. I'm curious, what toothpaste do you use now?
I use Pepsodent actually. I'm a big
Okay.
fan of Pepsodent. It's a wonderful toothpaste.
Well, I mean, it's still Unilever. So,
Yes.
yeah. Um, and this is very interesting because you talked about how people didn't brush their teeth. You talked about how the habits of pan and smoking actually caused bad breath, and it was not people were not used to using toothpaste, and that's a very deep consumer insight. And what we know is that consumer goods companies, especially Unilever, the hope. I mean, again, marketing is the core of Unilever, but it's not just marketing by just making massive ads, but marketing to solve people's problems. And I think that you said that right at the beginning. Um, can you shed some light on that? And again, if you have any other interesting stories, would love to hear. But how has that impacted the way that Unilever functions, the way that you have functioned in your career at Unilever, where there's such a strong focus and knowledge of the end consumer?
I'll tell you, anything in marketing in Unilever actually starts with consumer. And I think that's the philosophy because the way we do is, and many organizations have many ways of doing it. A lot of organizations actually have technology. and they said, I've got this technology. How do I go and sell, go and figure out? So that's one approach. And I wouldn't say right or wrong, but the Unilever approach has always been, can I understand what the consumer problem is?
Yeah.
And then can I create? And typically behavioral change typically happens. There are two, three things. One is there must be a trigger for change. There has to be some
Okay.
trigger, or there is a barrier to change. So technically, you're able to figure out the barrier and the trigger for change. And the third element is there might be a driver. There's some fundamental driver for people to adopt certain things. So once you're able to understand that, then you go back and design. So if you remember the Pepsi example, I talked about the uncertainty of mothers. So which means the mothers are worried that kids will go out and eat all this junk food. How do I make sure they're
Yeah.
protected? Which means you have to go back and create a product that actually protects for that duration. Because I am telling mother that, listen, let your kid be. They will eat what they eat, but I am going to protect you for 12 hours. Which means I'm going to have to make a product that protects for 12 hours. Or if I'm going to go and talk about that this product has antibacterial mouthwash, it's going to give you really great bread. I'm going to go and actually need to deliver on that. So,
Yeah.
it inherently has to have a deep rooted consumer insight. So, for example,
Yeah.
I spoke about LiveBoy as well. Do you know that the single biggest reason diarrheal incidence is to go up was because people never used to wash their hands after defecation?
Really?
And yes, so that was the single because well, they didn't use soap or anything for after defecation. Now you need to really understand that. Listen, this actually, I mean, nothing can match a mother's loss of his child.
Yeah.
I don't think anything can compare to that. And if
Yeah.
you realize that the reason behind is the fact that a simple small soap could have made a difference. So you go and design that product and educate people. It was so important. So we realized people understood. I used to say, tell you everyone, I used to run the largest education program, and I'm sure they still do in Bangladesh, of teaching kids how to wash their hands. So we used to have a 28 days education program in going to schools, and we
Yeah.
used to educate them in terms of how to do a hand wash. And we have seen as people adopted hand washing more and more, the
Hmm.
incidence of diarrheal diseases actually started to come down.
Okay. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So,
So many
so
cases,
it's
this is
like
why
when
it's deeply rooted. Sorry, go ahead.
there was a bit of a lag. Sorry, I think the last part. But all I was going to mention is that I mean it's incredible to see when brands impact lives or impact society. And how often does that happen? But obviously, that's something that you were able to achieve with Liveboy and definitely with Closeup. If you consider bad breath, I mean that is a problem for sure. And if you look at the larger picture of CPG, consumer goods, or even Unilever in particular, Unilever knows their customers very well. And if you look at across all businesses, being a consumer-facing consumer brands business, Unilever knows its users or its end consumers extremely well. Could you give us an idea, or could you share a story where you went ahead and you really dug deep into who your consumers were for a particular brand, and how that ended up shaping a decision that maybe changed the course for Unilever?
Well, any CPG or FMCG company, at the heart of them is consumers. You can't live without understanding and knowing what the consumer challenges and issues are. And
Yeah.
sometimes what happens is, unless you're really into understanding them, you'll never be able to figure out the problem is. And let me sort of take one of the brands, Surf Excel. Now, typically, it's a quite a well-known premium brand, and you ask consumers, everybody loves it. And we were actually trying to figure out how do you improve, how do you change. And what we did was an ethnographic study where we observed how she buys, how she uses the product, how she uses the pack, and all the elements all together. And what we were trying to do was actually literally observe how when she gets in the when you buy a Surf Excel pack, you go home and you typically pour in a container. Now you should see how she actually cuts open. So typically what she does is she actually holds it, the packet, and starts using a knife and starts cutting it.
Wow.
And the knife sort of comes inside inwards towards her. So you suddenly realize the difficulty, but she never realized that that's a problem. And that's how the whole concept of easy tier had come. It's a long time back, and now you would see an easy tier solution for most our packs, including many other packs as well, any product that you use. So fundamentally, you realize that unless you really, really are able to figure out consumer behavior and really, really drive that, you will never be able to change it. In many cases, they won't be able to tell you till you're really observing and seeing what she's doing. And by doing that, you really unlock. And then that becomes a experience that she loves. Because next time when she takes it in and she realizes, oh wow, it's easy to use, open as well. So you're trying to really give a brilliant experience and every time trying to make that experience incrementally better.
That's incredible. So basically, what we see now as the easy tear packs on Surf Excel was what came from that story of you having seen a lady cutting the pack with a knife towards. That's incredible, and that consumer insight has changed the packaging, of course, for Surf Excel today. Wow. I mean, talk about knowing your consumers, right? That's incredible. I'm curious to know. We see that at least throughout the past few decades, if you look at a country like Bangladesh, if you look at India, and if you look at a multitude of different developing countries, the majority, 90% of retail, especially of consumer goods, happened in traditional retail, these neighborhood stores, your mom and pop stores. So I'm curious to understand from you, what kind of a role did you see these mom and pop stores play during lockdowns? And what kind of a future do you see, or what kind of a transformation do you see for these stores as well? This channel of traditional retail, will it stay? Will it change? Will it still be dominant? I'm curious to hear from you.
So firstly, during COVID, the traditional mom and pop, kirana, local grocers have been a lifesaver for all of us. I think personally, you'll know when modern trade shut down, the supply lines actually really collapsed. It was the local retailer that helped us to really provide our goods and services. So I think there have been absolutely, and we have seen an uptick there because as other channels shut down, they were the ones that came to save us. Now, there is this almost just crystal ball gazing saying that, listen, long term they will not exist. But the reality is, in our sort of market, which is so fragmented and so wide and diverse, there will always be a role of traditional grocers. In fact, there are a large chunk of the Indian, Bangladesh market, many parts of Southeast Asia, like Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, even if you look at Turkey. So many of these markets, they will play a critical role. And I think what will happen is we need to continue to make sure that they are actually uh, because this is the only part of the business where it is not necessarily connected, because modern trade e-commerce you literally get signals and stuff. I think what the transformation that's going to happen is, and it is already happening, where we are actually connecting and wiring up all of these stores, because the moment you're able to wire up, imagine that you're able to really give an end-to-end experience, whether it is from a retailer perspective to really look at their inventory, look at their assortment, look at how they can drive their businesses up, to a shopper's perspective where you're able to give an e-commerce experience to the local shop that she trusts. So there's a
Yeah,
huge amount of opportunity to end-to-end wiring up and connecting and making this stores much more future fit.
that's amazing to hear. And you talk about how, as one of the leaders in the Unilever system, you talk about the importance of traditional retail. You talk about how important it is to help them transform, and then they will continue to play a critical role. Another thing I just thought of as you were saying this is their mindset, the mindset of these retailers. And through my personal experience, having worked with traditional trade, especially in the space of FMCG, and one thing that's extremely hard to influence is their mindset. And what I can say about Unilever is not only does Unilever build strong brands and is top of mind for consumers like you and me, but somehow Unilever has managed to also be top of mind for these retailers. And that plays a huge role for these businesses because these retailers are the endpoints where the customers are buying products. You are running loyalty programs and trade schemes, and you're placing new products in these stores. And they will only sort of do so willingly and accept these different activities if they believe that the brand is strong and will ultimately sell to the consumer. So being top of mind for the retailer is extremely important. Now, my question is, I consistently, first of all, I consistently saw that every time you ask a retailer which product sells, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, Unilever products, FXL sells, Bond sells, Dove sells, etc., etc., etc." How do you manage that? Like, how do you manage to be top of mind for a retailer?
So I think a very interesting question. While I talk about tech and data and connectivity, I think at the heart of this is the fact that you need to really build fantastic relationship with them. And the
Yeah,
relationship is in terms of servicing them, in terms of enhancing their businesses. And you really, and this is something that Unilever has invested and has become a competitive advantage, to be honest. And it is inherently in the blood of every Unilever customer development people, marketing people. And let me give you an example of this. And this
sure.
is the Philippines example where one of these modern trade, Philippines is obviously a country with constantly in floods and cyclone and stuff. So one of these customers, his store went underwater. And then obviously when the water receded, he had to clean the products and stuff. So when the owner came, he actually came and he was surprised to see a Unilever rep actually cleaning a competition product. Then
Wow.
and he said, I thought, and he actually went back to the CEO of the Philippines business and said that, listen,
Yeah.
I didn't expect you to clean competition because they would have come and said. Then the CEO said, it has nothing to do with competition on us. It is about your business. If your business grows, if you thrive, I will thrive. And
Wow.
it is not about only my brands and my product, it is about your total business. So we need to really look at from that perspective. Huh? Because remember, we are in the business of helping their businesses to grow. And once you start looking at it from that perspective, my own business will grow. And that's when you realize that it is not a transactional relationship. Huh? It is not a tech for the sake of tech. There is a huge amount of human touch. And that I think in any of these retail environment, that it becomes a huge differentiator.
So thank you for that. And any before we move into the next phase of this episode, any final words on the future of how you see the transformation happen in consumer goods industry and retail? What's your sort of future lens telling you?
I'll tell you, if you look at the broad sort of macroeconomic changes or the big shift that is happening, I think the reality is we will see continued consumer fragmentation. That's going
Mhm,
to be there. There is also trade consolidation in many ways that will
mhm.
also continue to happen, despite the fact that there will still be a large sort of kirana. They will still be there, and that will continue to be challenged. And what will make, as a result of this, there will be a lot of data and analytics that's going to come in our way. And that will actually become the biggest differentiator in the FMCG CPG industry. In fact, I keep on telling my team that, listen, the next set of competitors is not going to be the typical competitor in CPG. It's going to be the
Yeah,
tech companies that are able to really maneuver and work with data, because that will give you those understanding that you need to have. So as a CPG organization, it's very important that at the center of your strategy is data, tech, and analytics.
what are three attributes you look for in a team member?
So I think the first thing about attribute is work ethics. I think it is very important to have strong work ethics, because if you have that, you can really, really deliver. Second, I believe is important is humility, because a lot of cases humility gets you a long way. And the third one is learning. You must have the ability to constantly learn. If these three are there, I believe it makes you a wonderful human being and a great executive.
Wonderful. What book do you recommend?
So that's a very loaded question, because my reference and era has really changed. Uh,
Okay,
um, there used to be a wonderful book called Execution by Ramcharan, a wonderful professor and an outstanding book. I recommend that because it brilliantly talks about great execution. But of recent, I've been reading lots of book. So there's a book called Abundance, and then there's a book around super intelligence.
okay,
A lot of these are by the next generation people that have transformed the world, whether it is about AI, machine learning, or it's about how we really leverage AI, machine learning to change the fate of the world. So some of these books, and that is my choices have significantly changed from where I started to where I've landed.
yeah. What was your worst subject in school?
Geography. I survived brilliantly. Geography.
And one more question, which is, what time of the day are you most inspired?
Actually, morning, early morning, uh, inspired. Even today, I had to write a document, and I was struggling yesterday, 9, 10 in the night, and I just couldn't think. I was up at 5 a.m. in the morning, and I was writing the document. In an hour, I actually got that document out.
Wonderful. So that closes the rapid fire round. Thank you so much, Javed bhai, for coming on the third episode of Retales. It was really exciting speaking to you, learning from you, and hearing your stories. I hope that I'm sure our viewers have enjoyed this tremendously. And thank you once again for being a part of this journey.
Wonderful, Zaref, and thank you so much for the opportunity. I had fun discussing this and making you wake up early morning for the session. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much once again.
All the
Bye bye.
best.
Bye bye.
Bye.